Donald Trump nailed Vladimir Putin handshake during G20 meeting. Vladimir Putin drew the body language equivalent of a weapon when he pointed his finger at a dominant Donald Trump at the G20 summit. Body language expert Judi James claims the U.S. president nailed the historic handshake with a Russian leader and proved his superior status with a double-handed fist pump at the event in Germany. The firebrand property tycoon dominated the Kremlin strongman with a double-handed first pump. Vladimir Putin points his finger at President Trump, which is the body language version of a weapon, claims Judi James. Trump and Putin pictured sitting down to talk in front of the world's press at the G20 summit. Trump appears to clutch his arm in just after another round of handshakes with the Kremlin boss. Trump also shared an energetic handshake with French President Emmanuel Macron alongside Chancellor Merkel. While speaking with The Sun Online, she said, "If this shake were a prize fight, and it nearly was, I would have awarded a points victory to Trump." She added, "The gap was a sure sign of the pressure felt by both men at that moment, but as Putin raised an almost weary-looking hand for the shake, Trump leaned forward with an outstretched arm and offered his hand palm up. This is an infamous power trap, and Putin had no option but to put his hand into the clamp. Once there, he suffered an underarm patting from Trump that made him look like the dominant leader. So much so that Putin responded with a pointed finger, which is the body language equivalent of drawing a weapon." Trump looked far more at ease here, and the pose ended with Putin standing with his hands folded on the table while Trump continued to lean across the gap and pat him on the back. If Trump wanted to show friendliness but superior status, I have to say he nailed it this time. The U.S. president pictured chatting with Putin and Jean-Claude Juncker. Trump pictured giving the Kremlin boss a dominant pat on the back. A copy of Trump's G20 speech titled World Economy, Trade and Finance. Trump accidentally showed the world his speech while patting President Macron on the back. Theresa May nudges Donald Trump to face the right way in group G20 picture. But according to social behavior expert Judi, the Kremlin boss is also skilled at dominating his opponents when it comes to handshakes, making the Trump defeat even tougher to take. She said, "Putin is an adept power patter, adding a paternal pat to his shakes with world leaders in a bid to register dominance. He also uses disarming humor, as he did with Merkel, getting her to laugh with him as they shook to suggest strong rapport. With Trump, the huge spatial gap between the two men played to the U.S. president's advantage." Once the handshake politics were over, Trump and Putin sat down in front of the world's media, where the New York property tycoon said the pair had been discussing lots of positive things. The brash American told the Russian leader that it's an honor to be with you before the duo had further talks away from the cameras at the event in Germany. The friendly tone of the meeting was in stark contrast to last year's G20 summit in Hangzhou, China, where then President Obama gave the Kremlin strongman an icy glare. Trump and Putin are expected to discuss hot topics such as the Syrian conflict, North Korea and Russia's annexation of Crimea during the event in Hamburg. Both men have said they want to try and repair relations between Russia and America, which Trump recently described as being at an all-time low. President Obama during a frosty final meeting with Putin at last year's G20 in Hangzhou, China. The German chancellor puts her hands on her face while appearing to talk with the U.S. president. Trump pictured sitting next to Chinese President Xi Jinping and Merkel. In Washington, Trump's critics on both sides of the political divide will be hoping that the former Apprentice host raises the issue of Russian meddling in the presidential election. U.S. intelligence agencies agree that the Kremlin interfered in the American democratic process by launching cyber attacks against Hillary Clinton's doomed campaign and promoting fake news on social media. But while visiting Poland yesterday, Trump again refused to accept the conclusion by the 17 separate U.S. spy agencies that Russia interfered to try to help the firebrand Republican sensationally win the presidency last November. He said, "Nobody really knows for sure." World leaders including Donald Trump, second from far left, and Vladimir Putin, fourth on the right, pictured at the G20 summit in Germany. The New York property tycoon pictured sitting alone at the event. German Chancellor Angela Merkel welcomed Russian President Vladimir Putin as G20 summit kicks off in Hamburg. Yet during his speech in Warsaw, Trump openly criticized Putin's regime, saying it should cease its destabilizing activities in Ukraine and elsewhere, and its support for hostile regimes including Syria and Iran. During the much-anticipated G20 meeting, Russia will want the U.S. to return the two compounds in New York and Maryland that were seized by the Obama administration as punishment for the election meddling. Former KGB spy Putin also wants the U.S. to ease sanctions it imposed on Russia after Moscow annexed the Crimean Peninsula and for its support of separatist elements in Ukraine.